Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Jimmy Kimmel returns after ABC suspends him over his Charlie Kirk monologue. Trump points to India in controversy over H-1B visa bill. And multiple European countries officially recognize Palestine state despite U.S. opposition. Charlie Kirk's memorial described as among most heavily fortified events ever. I wonder why. Alex Jones reveals, by the way of Donald Trump, that those who don't take pills or vaccines have no autism. And the UN recognition of Palestine as a state signals major diplomatic shift and symbolic power. And believe me, we're going to touch on what it truly means that the UN and hundreds of European countries have now recognized Palestine as a statehood. I'm pretty sure that we all know about now that Jimmy Kimmel was suspended indefinitely by ABC, and it definitely means most of the time means forever. But 400 actors, as well of all of the sorts of media gurus, have come out and spoke out against this of the freedom of speech. And Disney, after a monologue criticizing MAGA and Trump supporters in response to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Now, this suspension triggered affiliate pullouts like Sinclair, Nexstar, accusation of political pressure from FCC Chair Brendan Carr, and free speech debates, which actually free speech is in America. But again, as I always state, you have the right and the constitutional right, that is, of freedom of speech, but you do not have the freedom of the consequences, even though it violates the Constitution. Now, after 6 days, Disney announced that the show would resume, and some affiliates are still resisting carrying the program, and they're just doing this to save face with President Trump. That's all they're doing, because President Trump, in some regards, is controlling every facet of the U.S. government. Even though the reason why we have three branches, rather, of the U.S. government, so we can separate power, so no branch has more power than the other, that you have to go through the Supreme Court in order to do certain things. You have to go through the president so he can sign it into law. You have to go to the executive branch for senators and congressmen to vote on certain things. This is the reason why we have three branches of government. So the president doesn't have ultimate power. But because of his influence and because of the amount of political pressure that he has imposed, people are literally falling in line. I mean, even to the point now, the Supreme Court is aligning with Donald Trump more than ever over a 90-year president, that he now has a propensity and power to fire the FTC commissioner, one of the FTC commissioners. The president never had that power, but now the Supreme Court is almost stating to a certain degree that he now has that power. This is utterly ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. And Trump lays the H-1B visa bill at Moody's door, because now it's either going to cause 70% of the, Indian nationals that come over here. I want you guys to think about this. They call them talent visas, or they work visas, H-1B visas. Out of all the H-1B visas that have been approved in America, and these are the numbers from last year, 70+% has been from India. So that means out of 10 people, 7 of them are Indian nationals coming to America and working. And the fields that they're in, ladies and gentlemen, I had a graph of him. Let me see if I can find that very quickly. There it is. Let me blow this up for you guys so you know exactly the markets in which they are heavily being ran. And I said this many times before. It says the sciences, the techs, and the services, engineering, 129,000. H-1B visa acceptance, top industries in 25. Secondly, I mean, it's 3 times the amount, ladies, almost 4 times the amount. When we look at 34,000 in comparison to almost 130,000. And 71% of H-1B visas go to Indian nationals that come over here to work. And again, I want to make sure we understand that Indian nationals are not taking our jobs. American businesses are giving them our jobs. Oh, well, there's not enough American citizens who are qualified, who are trained, who are skilled, who have the certifications in order to do these jobs. And that would be correct. That is because the State Department, the Department of Education on the federal and state level has failed the American people. They have not prepared us for the future. They haven't even prepared us for the present. We're still taking the same more boring classes. Now, granted, in my son's high school, which is public, he's inside of an engineer course. He's in advanced science, advanced math, all these advanced classes. But there are some classes, at least 3 of them, I'm just like, how's that going to help him? Well, you should be teaching your own kids. That's true. But if you have working parents who don't have the time, they don't have the amount of wealth to home train their kids or hire a tutor to home train and educate their kids, then you would send them off to public school because you're off working, right? And here's another thing that people really don't understand when we're talking about private schools and charter schools and public schools. Let me tell you, there's no school in America that's free. There's no school in America that's free. It doesn't matter if you are in wealthy neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods, rural neighborhoods, if you live in the hills and trailer parks and the hoods and ghetto, it doesn't matter where you live. No public school is free. Your tax dollars from the meager income that you may receive, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, your tax dollars are paying for public schools. Your tax dollars are paying for public services. It's paying for the fire department, the police department, and public schools, and roads, and the infrastructure, and water, and electricity. That is what your tax dollars are for. So again, there's no free schools in America. Public schools are just not as expensive as private schools or boarding schools that we have. So again, I believe it's important that we involve ourselves in our communities and go to these parent teacher conferences so we can go to the council board of education in our area and change your curriculum, because we can't complain about people coming over here legally and basically taking advantage of the opportunities that is being presented to them. How do you think they're getting over here? American businesses, and I showed this just yesterday on my broadcast, large companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, this to name a couple, are literally going to these countries like India and China, the top 2 that we recruit from, and recruiting the top talent in the tech field, in the science field, in engineering. And they are the ones who are making all these 6-figure jobs. They're the ones who taking the amount of wealth that they have accumulated from the American businessmen, recruiting them and giving them $150,000, $180,000, $200,000. And now they buy up all these large Indian neighborhoods, and they're owning their own restaurants and dry cleaners and car washes and nail shops and massage parlors. They're doing all of these. They're basically making, like we have in a lot of cities in America, Chinatown, they're making Indian town. Are they wrong? Absolutely not. First, they're here legally, number 1. Number 2, they didn't get here by themselves. No, they did not. These American businesses give them grant money and relocation money to come over here and give them a stipend. Some of them have to pay it back and some of them don't, for them to buy a house and buy a car. Soon as they touch American soil, they're richer than 8 out of 10 Americans. Let me say it again. Soon as they reach American soil, soon as they step off the plane, they are richer and more wealthier and better off than 8 out of 10 American. And it's not your fault. America has failed itself. And on some regards, again, I don't agree with President Trump a lot, but I will point out things that I kind of align with him on. He's deterring all of these American businesses by imposing $100,000 visa application fee and limiting the amount of time that they can stay over here by the way of 6 years. So this is how we have to look at this. He's empowering America and the education system and the businessmen to hire Americans. Am I the only one that's looking at it like this? Hopefully I am not. Now, they state that Charlie Kirk's memorial was one of the most heavily fortified events of its kind. And that doesn't include the fireworks. I wonder why. I wonder why this was heavily fortified and there was more security here than any other time in history when public figures, okay? This is at his memorial service. I'll let you guys chime in the comment section below because I know that you know more than I do. Now, European recognition of Palestinian state shows U.S. still is the only power that counts. And when we're talking about all these European countries, we're talking about France, we're talking about the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Portugal, and others formally recognized Palestinian statehood in the recent UN international gatherings. And believe it or not, this move really defies sustained U.S. as well as Israel opposition, and it signals diplomatic isolation of the U.S. position on this issue. America, by the way of Donald Trump, President Trump, has yet to recognize Palestine as a country, has yet to recognize Palestine as a nation, has yet to recognize Palestine as a statehood. And a lot of people are basically saying this is largely symbolic, but it may impact international legitimacy, negotiations, and public opinion around a two-state solution. Well, basically what they're stating is this has only been a one-state this entire time, that the world has never recognized Palestine as a statehood, as a nation, and as a country, and even the people, even though Palestinians have been in that region before Israel was constructed. Was there a Palestine before 1948? Yes. Was there a Palestine before 1947? Yes. If you look up those two key years, then you will understand the UN partition plan. The same UN is now recognizing Palestine as a statehood. Is the same UN that had helped and supported Israel and Jews to take over a portion of Palestine for a two-state region, for a two-state solution. But then again, as Israel was expanding its borders into Gaza, as they were occupying it as well, into the West Bank and into East Jerusalem, which are all different parts of Palestine, they was never recognized as a statehood. But we're going to touch on that a little more here later in the broadcast, and we won't be before you here long, ladies and gentlemen. But I do want to point out that Alex Jones revealed by the way of Donald Trump that people and children that do not take pills and or vaccine do not have any autism. I don't know if this has been publicly shown, but I'll show it right here today. Here you go.
I can say that there are certain groups of people that don't take vaccines and don't take any pills that have no autism. Does that tell you something? That's currently, is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are some studies that suggest that, yeah, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish, yeah, virtually. I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say.
Mr. President, don't we know you are definitely not careful with what you say. You don't give a damn about what you say.
But you have certain groups, the Amish as an example, they have essentially no autism.
You just saw the whole world change. The president of the United States said Amish don't have autism, which is true. You just heard them say only people taking shots, the pills are sick. This is the sea change. This is real. You don't say this. This devastates the enemy. They'll probably kill Trump and Kennedy for this. But I'm telling you, everything we've done to move the needle to this point, thank you, Jesus, and all you black pill people can fuck off. Fuck you. You don't know shit.
I do apologize for the obscene profanity that Alec Jones has stated. But again, he's revealing by the way of Donald Trump that those who don't take vaccines and or pills, studies have shown by the way of Robert F. Kennedy, some studies have shown that people do not have autism. And he gave an example like the Amish, right? Because they don't take really anything. They just eat, fresh food that they grow in their gardens, eat their grass-fed animals and things of that nature. And they don't use any electrical or modern technology, right? So they don't have a lot of the issues that people who live in, the regular society actually have, where we're taking vaccines and shots when we're born. They just have natural births. And I don't know the actual life expectancy of Amish people. But again, I just wanted to reveal that to you guys because, having that information may deter some people from having their children to be vaccinated. Okay. They may have their children to be vaccinated. Now, France, they also state that they are recognizing Palestine as a statehood. And I told you some of these countries prior to. And Trump to address UN as the division with allies deepen over Palestinian statehood and trade. So America, again, has not recognized Palestine as a statehood. I mean, we are literally the world power, but we have all these European nations, we have all these countries around the world that are recognized Palestine as a statehood, but we have yet to do so. And I just want to show you very quickly here a map of all the countries who plan to recognize Palestine as a statehood and those who have already recognized Palestine as a statehood. So the bright green that you see here, they recognize Palestine as a statehood, and the orange is they plan to recognize Palestine as a statehood. And I believe there's only one country, and that's Slovenia. Okay, this country right here, very small country in Europe. They are planning to recognize Palestine as a statehood. But I want you guys to really look at this. We're talking about Australia, almost the entire continent of Africa, with the exception of these two countries right here. You have Russia, China, Mongolia, ladies and gentlemen, India, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, all the stands, Turkey, Iraq, Syria, okay, France, Spain, Portugal, I named some of these, United Kingdom, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, okay? So all of these countries, even Iceland has recognized it, okay? But this is Alaska right here, and this is United States of America. We have Hawaii over here somewhere. This is part of Central America, but Nicaragua, Mexico, El Salvador, Belize, Guatemala. The entire continent of South America has recognized Palestine as a statehood. So almost the entire world, and the only parts that have not recognized Palestine as statehood is the ones you see in gray, okay? India, Nepal, all of these countries are recognizing Palestine as a statehood, except the one that most people believe it means the most is the United States of America. Is the United States of America. We have yet to recognize Palestine as a statehood by the way of President Trump. So Prime Minister Starmer came out with this message here.
The hope of peace and a two-state solution. I state clearly, as Prime Minister of this great country, that the United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine. We recognized the state of Israel more than 75 years ago as a homeland for the Jewish people. Today, we join over 150 countries who recognize a Palestinian state also. A pledge to the Palestinian and Israeli people that there can be a better future.
Well, and I know some of the questions that you guys may have. Why is this so important that the world, especially the UN and the support of all these other countries, actually recognize Palestine as a statehood? So this is about recognition versus reality. History has spoken, ladies and gentlemen, because the United Nations General Assembly, alongside more than 140 nations worldwide, has recognized Palestine as a state. Yet, as Gaza burns under relentless Israeli bombardment, the world is asking, does recognition matter when bombs keep falling? Gaza is in flames. Gaza is in rubble. Gaza has nearly been destroyed. Every structure, every building. That is the question that a lot of people are having. Why is it so important that the UN and these 140 nations worldwide has recognized Palestine as a state? Again, does recognition matter when bombs keep falling? And the answer is, it's a mixed bag. The answer is both yes and no, because recognition is power, recognition is legitimacy, recognition is survival in the eyes of international law, but recognition doesn't stop missiles. Recognition doesn't stop starvation that's been occurring in Gaza. Recognition doesn't stop war crimes that's been happening in Gaza. Because again, according to the UN, Israel, by the way of the IDF, is committing a genocide. That's not me speaking, that's the UN. And so the struggle of Palestine is now caught between symbolism of being recognized as a state and the reality. Because statehood recognition, they now have access to the ICC and the ICJ. And that's what I had up on your screens here very quickly, ladies and gentlemen. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, prosecutes individuals for war crimes and genocide and crimes against humanity and aggression, acting as a court of last resort when national courts cannot or will not act. In contrast, International Court of Justice, the ICJ that we spoke about, is the United Nations principal judicial organ that hears civil disputes between states and issues advisory opinions. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, the UN has its own army, which is a mixed bag of all of these countries under the UN. So that we have United Nations and as people will say, they have their own, again, they have their own soldiers, but some people say they're humanitarian soldiers, but they can actually go in and stand in the way of the IDF and literally stop the genocide, stop the war crimes, stop the killing, stop the destruction of Gaza. But will they? Now that the UN, during its General Assembly, and have the backing of 140 countries that are under the UN, recognize Palestine as a statehood, and they now have access and powers of the ICC and the ICJ, what is the UN now going to do? Because as I stated before, Gaza is in flames. But here's one thing that a lot of people are missing. America's veto power. While US is refusing the recognition of Palestine, and the refusal carries weight, and we're talking about the Security Council permanent seat and the military funding to Israel, the Gaza crisis and the recognition that we're referring to strengthens the Palestinians' voice in war crime investigations. By the way, of humanitarian corridors, but it doesn't end the IDF strikes. While all of this is going on, even though they've been recognized, it's not going to stop the IDF and all the strikes they've been occurring. Do not forget, there was roughly 2 million people living in Gaza. And the reports have it that 61,000 plus people have perished. And out of that 61,000 people, they're stating anywhere from between 15 to 20,000 of them have been Hamas militants, Hamas terrorists. So roughly 40,000 innocent people have been killed. Are these legitimate claims for war crimes? Is this a legitimate claim for genocide? And now that Israel has basically deployed a ground invasion of Gaza and reoccupying Gaza, you guys remember the reoccupying of Gaza? And this still remains. No one is stopping them. All of these countries, except for the United States of America, all of these people who are publicly speaking out against what the UN has labeled a genocide, and America, by the way of President Trump, has yet to call this a genocide, has yet to recognize Palestine as a state. And all these people who support President Trump, like granted, you can support him on other legislation, other things that he's doing, like, okay, I like what President Trump is doing here, but when are all these right-wing people are going to come out and say, I disagree with President Trump, he should recognize Palestine as a statehood? Or are they in fear of backlash? Right? Because here's the thing. Israel. Where's Israel getting their money? Where's Israel getting their support? Where's Israel getting their resources? Where's Israel getting technology? And it points back to, wait a minute, America, 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 America. Because again, we're almost the only country that is not recognizing Palestine as a statehood. Where is it at? There's a map. We're the only country, ladies and gentlemen. And Israel has started to reoccupy Gaza once again. And I guess another good example would be when we're talking about, war crimes and genocide, would be South Africa apartheid era and its recognition. The Kosovo independence recognition mattered, but came before full liberation. Palestine doesn't have any freedom. They're not liberated. And the only way they're going to become liberated is the entire world is going against Israel. Now, I don't know this speech verbatim, but in one of Adolf Hitler's speeches, he called Jews foul vermin that needs to be exterminated. I 1000% disagree with that. But I need to dive deeper into the text. I need to do a lot more research on why did he say that? Not that it's justified, but why, right? Because as people will always state, context matter. And not just contextualizing things, but the content of the context. Why did he say that? Why did he go out and murder and kill in all these very inhumane manners 6 million Jews? Why? Why did he believe that? And again, do not forget, a lot of the Jews that live in Israel, their descendants come from Eastern Europe mostly. They come from Russia, they come from Ukraine, they come from Poland, they come from Belarus, they come from all these different countries, right? If you look at them and they did blood tests on a genetic scale, they will come back as European, they will come back as white. Now, they would tell you that their ethnic is Jew, which is a religion. I think then in that case, people around the world who claim themselves to be Christians, who claim themselves to be Muslim, is their ethnic group, right? But on a genetic scale, if we had to deal with the social construct of race, then majority of the Jews in Israel will be white, right? Or am I just blowing smoke? I'm just asking questions. That's all I'm doing here. Sometimes asking questions can get you in trouble, but that's the nature of the beast. But here's the truth. Here's the truth. I just want to make sure we stay on target with the truth here at Blacklogic. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as a notification bell so you're notified every time I release a video. The truth is that America has yet to recognize Palestine as a statehood. As a matter of fact, they refuse to, by the way of President Trump and the American government. But let me tell you this, America is not the world. And the world has spoken. The UN has spoken. The oppressed have spoken. And in the long arc of history, recognition becomes reality. See, as we've been stating for a long time, right here on Blacklogic, that Palestine is not just an idea. Palestine is a nation. And the question is no longer if the world will accept it, but when will America will stop, will stop standing in the way of justice. Now, just to end on this note, and I'll probably not even report on Charlie Kirk ever again. In the end time of his days, within the last month before he was killed, even Charlie Kirk questioned Israel and its acts and its tactics against Palestine, as well as their statehood.